Fix that up a little bit. Good afternoon. I'd like to call the Finance, Ways and Means Committee to order for March 29th, 2022. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Representatives Campbell, Camper, Crawford, Faison, Freeman, Gant, Garrett, Gillespie, Hawk, Hicks, Hodges, Lamberth, Lynn, Miller, Ogles, Sexton, Shaw, Sparks, Todd, Whitson, Williams, Wendell, Zachary, Vice Chairman Baum, Chair Lady Hazelwood.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Are there any personal orders or announcements before we get underway? Representative Shaw, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have with me today a young lady from my district who's shadowing me. She came to see how hard I work, I assume, and haven't been able to impress her yet, but she's here, Miss Bethany Miller. Would you stand? I'd like for y'all to help me make a welcome today from my district. Thank you.
Representative Shaw, after she sees you working today, she is going to be duly impressed after this committee, I promise. Any other personal orders? Chairman Crawford.
Thank you, Chair Lady. I have with me today the president of the Republicans of Kingsport Club, also known as my wife. Would you please stand up? So,
Any other personal orders? Seeing none, we do have 20 bills on our calendar today, but before we get to that, I know there's a lot of interest in a document that just came out on the appropriations amendments, and we are going to go out of session and recognize Commissioner/Deputy Governor Ely and ask him to walk us through the amendments to the budget.
Thank you, Chair Hazelwood and members of the committee. Thank you for this opportunity to present Governor Lee's fiscal year 23 budget amendment. As you know, I've got our assistant budget office, Alex Schumann, with us, and our great budget director, Dave Thurman, with us here today as well. I'm Butch Ely, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here with this group, and I really appreciate the strong collaboration that we have shared over this year of putting this budget together. I know that each of you have unique priorities in your own on your own districts, but I really appreciate the ability that we've had to work together for really strong financial management for the entire state as well. Over the last 2 years, as y'all will recall, we've talked a lot about a multi-year planning process, a multi-year budget process. And I think that what you're seeing now is a positive result of the work that was done with this committee and this body over the last 2 years. We certainly, I think, today, with what we discussed with the amendment, with the original budget, is certainly a long view to get us to where we set out 2 years ago. It's a balanced budget, and it represents strategic investments for the entire state. Let me take us back real quick to where we were in February. When we talked about the guiding principles, and when this really is a year-long process, as you all know. We started on this budget last July, and the principles that the governor laid out with me at the beginning of that process are still very much applied today. And we're particularly proud of the position that we're able to be in today. A lot of states, as you well know, have struggled, and Tennessee has been in a great financial position. As I mentioned back in February and our discussions since then, However, we still are in volatile times, and we need to focus on preserving our recurring funds and continue to focus on investments on the non-recurring side. That's exactly what this budget before you does. Uh, this this bar chart shows the amount of new dollars that are available in this budget, and fully 71% of those new allocations in this budget are for one-time expenditures. This budget puts in the best position that we can be in to address whatever uncertainty may come our way. Knowing the caution that we took in presenting the proposed budget in February, this is what's available now in the budget amendment. A couple of highlights. If you look over in the far right-hand side, the 254 million number, 169 million we have recognized as reversion dollars. We also pulled back the 100 million that we've discussed before, the 100 million that we did not utilize from last year in the broadband funds. As you recall, we did not know what would be available from the federal standpoint with the American Rescue Plan. And we recently learned that the federal infrastructure law would allow us to utilize those dollars for broadband purposes. In our FSAG group, the Financial Stimulus Accountability Group, allocated 500 million, as I think you will know, from that fund as well, that we can do more than what was originally anticipated with 100 million. So the budget that we have before you today continues to come in the same spirit as that original budget, limiting the recurring growth cost and focusing on non-recurring investments. So let's look at some of the highlights that are in this amendment. One of our goals is to increase commerce through the 78 public use airports. There are our big five airports of the passenger airports and 73 general aviation airports, which together contribute 11% of our state's GDP, bringing in around $1 billion in tax revenue and support over 220,000 jobs. The federal resources that the airports received back during COVID were focused on operational expenses and just keeping the airports lights on and open during the pandemic. And what they need mostly now is assistance in growing infrastructure to help meet the demand of our rapidly growing state. Moving down, Memphis has a very unique opportunity to grow its capacity on the waterfront by constructing new docks that will be able to permit larger vessels to be able to berth as they go up and down the Mississippi. This will undoubtedly increase our state revenue as well as local tourism for West Tennessee. Finally, the Raceway Funding. You see here the 17 million will be going to the Department of Tourism for a grant to be able to help us add a fourth NASCAR race that would be here in Nashville. Next, tax relief for our citizens through a 1-month grocery tax holiday. Governor feels like the best way that we can make to help Tennesseans is by allowing them to keep more of their hard-earned money. So we're proposing a 1-month tax holiday for all groceries. This includes both the state and local taxes. Our cost estimate here of the 80 million includes us reimbursing the locals for any lost revenue in that. Next, talk a little bit about our opportunity to partner with the Secretary of State on voter verified paper audit trails. This is a proposed 15 million appropriation that will be used in conjunction with existing funds to help provide that were provided under the Help America Voter Act. So 61 counties will benefit from the combined funds to purchase new equipment with voter verifiable paper audit trails. I'll point out that the other counties already have this system, and this will allow voters to have increased confidence with the ability to view their votes on paper before they're cast. And the paper trail will enhance each county's ability to audit their elections. And then also point out that the county election commissions will continue to be able to select the voting system to be used in their respective county. Also want to thank Secretary Hargett in working with us on this for his extraordinary partnership and stalwart commitment to this important investment. You'll see in your schedule that all of you should have received an overview list of departments partnering with our several external entities. The goal of these partnerships certainly is to further our agenda without growing government more. We know that oftentimes these entities are very efficient and help us to achieve the goals that we're trying to achieve. I know that this body is familiar with direct grants in the past. We're trying to do more evolution toward kind of more accountability and more transparency with these grants by pushing these dollars into departments to work with these in partnership with these entities to make sure that we're fulfilling the long-term priorities of those departments and working together to achieve the goals that we can. It's our desire to partner with these entities and be able to demonstrate that progress that we're achieving over time. Next, we're proposing an investment supporting not just our Tennessee Titans, but an opportunity to attract Super Bowls, Final Fours, other national and international sporting events, other performances year-round that will allow us to have many activities there in the stadium that are not currently available because of not being enclosed. So our budget document reflects $55 million in recurring spending that will be utilized for the debt service of $500 million in bonds that will support this new covered world-class stadium. The revenue from these bonds will help to cover the debt service, and this will also be a demonstration of our full commitment to this investment. It also bears, I think, importance in saying that the private entity of the Titans, as well as the municipal of Nashville, will have funding that will make up the majority of the funding sources to achieve this goal. Next is the final proposed budget figures that include added to the budget amendment that we're presenting today. So here are the final figures for that. As you can see, we continue to be intentional to not grow the recurring budget too fast. You'll notice here the imbalance between recurring and non-recurring, and that is the same thing that we presented back in February, where we wanted to be safe and spend a significant amount of recurring revenue dollars on non-recurring investments. And that's exactly what this does. Revenues have certainly performed better, as we're all thankful for, than we expected, but we want to be strategic in knowing that many of these dollars will become available as we go into next year's budget process, because we know that a lot of those revenues originally were from one-time purchases of non-durable goods. And so we will go into next year's budget process with a cushion. Next, you'll see the pie chart that you are all familiar with. This shows together with the original proposed budget, all the categories of the cost increases. And we're proud of the diverse and the prudent nature that these investments represent for all of Tennessee. And now you'll see finally the comparison of total budget year over year from 22 to 23. You see a total budget here for recommended in fiscal year 23, along with the amendment of 52.8 billion. It's important to note, I'll point out, we talked a little bit about this back in February, but you'll see the 20 some odd amount, 19.8 right now in our 23 recommended budget from federal. That is certainly more than it has been in recent years. Prior to the pandemic, we were reporting around 14 billion annually in federal dollars, so significantly up from that standpoint. We do expect federal funding to begin to recede back to normal levels as we continue on. And as you know, the Financial Stimulus Accountability Group, FSAG, has continued to be focused on those federal investments. So I'll kind of end with how we began our conversation. This budget is certainly prudent and values long-term investments, but it also allows us to go back and get back toward the pre-pandemic priorities that were so important. More than ever, we're continuing to use evidence-based in ensuring that what we're doing works and continuing on focusing on outcomes. And so, again, I appreciate the opportunity to work with each of you in this committee. We certainly now will open it up for questions. If we don't know the answer, we'll get it to you, and certainly appreciate all that you do. Chair.
Thank you, Deputy Governor. I'll choose that title today. I want to return the thanks that you've just given us, because I know there's been a tremendous amount of work by you and your team to put both the original budget and this amendment together. And we're always feel like we're, under the gun, and time is of the essence and all these things, but it's a huge undertaking, and you've done a remarkable job. And I want to just personally express my appreciation for the conversations that we've had during this process, to make sure that while we might not be exactly on the same page, we at least kind of know the pages that we are on. Yeah. So I think that's very helpful to the process. And we do have a number of questions, so I will get underway. I've got a few. If they don't get asked, I'll do mine at the end. But Leader Lamberth, begin.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And Deputy Governor, thank you very much for the presentation. And I know it's been a long haul since early last year when you began this. About the time we finish up session, you and your team start working on next year's budget. So again, thank you for all the hard work that's gone into this. I wanted to highlight one thing that I think is extremely important to recognize, and that's the $78 million in there for general aviation airports. That's a program that's really going to pay dividends for years to come. And just wanted to bring that attention to the members, because there's lots of one-time investments in here, but this is one that is a one-time, but I hope will become recurring in years to come. That level of investment is something that they I hope can count on in years to come as at least somewhere near there, because it just allows them to build a really robust airport system throughout our state. And that's not just the large airports, but the small airports as well. And so just wanted to highlight that in the budget, as well as so many other things that I'm sure others will identify. But overall, I'm sure there's plenty more for us to work on over the next few weeks, but it appears in a year that we have underspent our budget in years past to create a surplus, that we're using a lot of this for one-time funds. And I think that is very wise. So just wanted to commend you on all of your hard work. Look forward to working with you over the next few weeks or however long it takes for us to get a good budget across the finish line. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Leader. One of the things that we've tried to do in this budget is to ensure, in working with TDOT, that the general aviation airports had the funds that they need to be able to maintain our level of service at our general aviation airports up to the standard that they're looking to be able to furnish year over year. And so this budget allows them to do that. In some years, it hasn't been as much, and they've built up some deferred maintenance. And this allows them to keep track with where they're going. And so I think it will be very useful and be put to good work. So,
Leader Lambert, you have a follow-up?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And just one other thing, the additional agency reversion, I know that's something that you all look at every single year. And I mean, that roughly $170 million that is in this budget, I know that that's something we have looked at, continue to look at, and even in good budget years, I think is a very healthy thing to look at both the reserve accounts and the reversionary numbers to ensure that we are spending the people's money wisely. And so if these departments are able to operate at a leaner level, if they're able to spend less money than is allocated to them, I'm glad to see that that is something that we are recognizing, even in the amendment. I mean, between when the original proposed budget came out and this, obviously what we do with all of these decisions belongs to this body. But I, again, appreciate your guidance on this. But I did want to highlight that additional 169,000 plus there, 169 million plus there in reversions, because I think that is a healthy exercise for us to continue to go down. And please continue to do that as well. Anywhere we can identify places that we can cut, which is in essence what that is, I think that's a good day for the state of Tennessee.
yes, sir. We will continue to do that, I assure you. Thank you.
And Deputy Governor, to go back to the airports, we had some conversation earlier. The 78 million, I believe 12 or 13 million of that is designated for general aviation. But in addition to that, I believe there are other monies that will be flowing from other sources. Could you speak to that just so everyone has a clear idea of the total amount of investment that we're putting into these entities?
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that out. So there's been a target of $50 million that TDOT has set as a target based on the current condition. They did a condition assessment of all those general aviation airports and came back with a number of about 50 million that they need on an annual basis to keep up with their current condition. And so with funds that they are getting either through the gas tax revenues, the jet fuel tax revenues that currently are coming in, as you know, several years ago that jet fuel tax was capped, and so it's generated less revenue as a result of that tax over the last few years, and a lot of that income or a lot of that revenue that ended up going to both general aviation as well as the large airports has been dwindling. Therefore is unsustainable in being able to allow them to do what they need to do. So what we did this year is to make sure that that through the different various funding sources that they have, federal as well as the jet fuel tax, then we closed that gap with this $12 million of funding to be able to make sure that they got to that $49-50 million level. And this also, as I mentioned, will allow the larger airports to do projects that they can embark upon to help from an infrastructure standpoint.
Thank you. I just want to make sure that everybody understands it's not just the $12 to $13 million that will be going to general aviation. And as I live in a community served by one of those, the big five airports, I know how critically important it is. There's a lot of interest in people flying in, getting into Tennessee in all parts of the state. And I think we have an opportunity to increase, air travel into our state, which would increase that 11% GDP, 11% of the GDP. So I think those are good investments. Next on my list, Chairman Whitson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and Governor, good seeing you in that new position too. I have just two questions regarding the governor's food tax holiday that holds local governments harmless. How can local governments know exactly how much revenue they will lose under this so they can plan their budget for next year? Is there an accurate way to predict and account for that?
Yeah,
change?
well, the intent, and Dave chime in with me here and add to whatever we're thinking on this. But the intent is that they not lose revenue. So what we're doing is putting enough dollars in this to cover whatever their portion is. I mean, so what they would normally get that citizens wouldn't be paying, we'll be supplementing back to them those dollars so that they don't have any net negative as a result of this. Is that fair?
Yes, so we're scoring this at $80 million lost revenue. 39 of it is loss of state dollars. Is that right? 49, I'm sorry, is the loss of state dollars, and the $31 million is to hold the locals harmless from that holiday.
Okay. And thank you. Just one more quick question, ma'am. On item number 76, there's an allocation for a TANF third-party evaluator grant. What is that funding for? I didn't see a number also on there. Is that position already been filled? Number 76?
So my understanding of this is that it's a result of the feds kind of moving the goalpost, and so this is only if TANF funds can't be used for that. And so, you want to add to that?
So DHS is in direct negotiations with the feds on the qualifications and be able to use TANF dollars. We just don't have confirmation yet. So what we want to do is make sure that until we get confirmation that we have a way to fund that third party evaluator contract.
Okay. And just one more briefly, ma'am.
All right. I think this is your second one more, but go ahead, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. I owe you one. And again, I just look forward to working with your staff and TBR as we discuss the mechatronics funding program and the impact of that fifth dual enrollment class. Thank you.
Yes. Let me just respond to that briefly, because the amount is smaller in this budget than it was last year. And we've had conversations with Chancellor Tidings and TBR. There's not to be any reduction in this program as a result of this reduction here. She's got the funds. They've got the funds to be able to continue that program as it's been designated already. And so we don't anticipate any reduction as a result of these dollars. Yeah.
And I just want to reiterate, when we're talking about the food tax holiday, this is just like what we did last year. And for all the local governments out there that might be watching or have concerns, just as you lost no money last year, you would lose no money under this plan. The state would reimburse the locals for whatever appropriate expenses would be. They would have otherwise have collected. So we just want to make sure that that's absolutely clear to everyone. Chairman Zachary.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioner team. Good to see you guys. Question regarding the Titan Stadium and the $500 million in bonds. It was just announced, I think yesterday or even this morning, that Buffalo and the state of New York have reached an agreement. The state of New York's doing $600 million. The NFL is doing a $200 million loan, and then the Bills are contributing $350 million. And then I looked at some other things related to Allegiant, which is the Raiders Stadium, SoFi, which is where the Rams and Chargers play, just talking about the various contributions, municipality, public money, and then private money and development that goes around that. Can you provide, or do you have more details that you can provide around that $500 million? What an NFL loan may look like? What is the contribution to the Titans? And then what's the overall return on investment for Tennesseans? Kind of like the Smoky Stadium for last year. It was clear that we contributed this. President Boyd, or UT President Boyd, was bringing a certain amount of money, create 3,000 jobs, $100 million economic impact. Do you have that kind of breakdown and that kind of impact and the commitments for the stadium?
Well, as you know from I guess from reading some of the news articles and so forth, that a lot of this has been transpiring over the last few weeks. Originally last year, as this body acted, there were a number of changes in the agreement with with the Sports Authority and the Titans last year in the amount of money that they're able to keep there in the stadium as a result of the sales tax. We believe that by being able to invest this 500 million, it will more than return that 500 million. And what the plan would be is that the additional dollars that will result as they develop that area around the stadium, the new stadium, then we still retain 50% of that new revenue that comes off of that. And so we envision, and our intent is to utilize those new tax dollars that would go off to pay the bond indebtedness over time to be able to work off that bond. So that funding will be in place, is in place already. And so as that project develops and begins collecting taxes, then we'll get our share of that and put those towards the payment of that debt service for those bonds.
Chairman Zachary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So is there a commitment from the Titans in ownership similar to what I read about Buffalo,
Yeah.
$350 million?
Good question. There will absolutely be a commitment from them. Basically, they're going to kind of be the last dollar, and that's one of the advantages I think for us to make this statement now and of our intention, because it sets the parameters of the deal, if you will, and then we'll see what the metropolitan government of Nashville does, and then the Titans will have to step into the remainder of that to fulfill whatever they end up doing as it results in the actual stadium itself. So they will be the ones that will end up determining to some degree what that ends up being from a total cost standpoint.
And then last question, Madam Chair.
Chairman Zachary.
And so then around the stadium, will it be similar? Is there the expectation that it will be kind of, again, back to the Smoky Stadium where it was somewhat like Wrigleyville, where it was going to bring retail and bring thousands of jobs? Is the expectation around the new stadium there would be for lack of a better term, a Wrigleyville built around the stadium that
Yes.
would create jobs and drive an economic impact? Am I understanding that correctly?
I think generally so. I want to be careful not to speak for the Titans because the reality is they have the lease or the ability, development rights for that with their relationship with the Sports Authority. So they'll end up being the ones that determine what that actually will look like from the standpoint of the mix between a hotel or retail or restaurants and that kind of thing. But we certainly envision, and I know from their conversations with us, that we certainly are counting on the ability to have that kind of development that will generate the sales tax revenue that will go in to be able to make this investment positive for Tennessee over time. And so that's certainly what they have kind of identified to us of their plan, and that's what we believe will make it a good investment for Tennessee.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And I just might add to that, we're talking about last year we were talking about a renovated stadium. This year we're talking about a new stadium. And that is going to impact revenues because had we done a renovated stadium, there would have been a period of time that you wouldn't have had revenues from that facility just because of the construction work. As I understand this plan, you would continue to have the Titans games and whatever else might be happening in the stadium while the new stadium is completed. So you don't have that loss of revenue either for the city or the state or the Titans for that matter. So that's another advantage to the new stadium. Chairman Hawk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Two lines of questioning, if I could, Madam Chair. To go down the line of the half $1 billion in bonds, what is our bonded indebtedness now, and what would this do to our bond level in the state?
That's a great question. So our bonded indebtedness now is only about 1.5% of our total our total revenues. And so very low. It's either one of the lowest in the country, if not the lowest in the country. I think adding this additional amount of bond will only increase that still to below 2% of our bonded indebtedness. So it's not a big needle mover at all. It'll actually be somewhere in the 1.7 or 8, I think, percent range. So I think it's something that we can do that will not impact us negatively whatsoever. With our rating agencies, we'll still maintain the AAA bond rating that we have and enjoy, and this will not negatively impact us whatsoever.
Chairman Hawk?
And thank you very much. And I'll go a different direction after I make a statement. Those of us that are baseball fans, as Major League Baseball looks to expand, we'd love to see a baseball playing out there somewhere too. So if I could go on to another issue on the overview on the little schedule that you've got for us. Item number 7, Tobacco Master Settlement Agreement. I see we've got an increase there, and can somebody give me an idea of where we are with Tobacco Master Settlement Agreement, the maturity of those dollars, how much longer can we expect those dollars? Is it in perpetuity, or where are we in terms of being able to count on those dollars? It is a substantial dollar figure, up to $174 million in the 22 budget, it appears. So where are we with the master settlement on tobacco, and what can we do to count on that in the future?
Respond to that.
So the update to the FY22 collections is based on information provided to us by the Attorney General's office, since they are the point person working with all the other states on the master settlement agreement. And so this is money that's going to be in hand. I think originally when the settlement began, there was supposed to be an end date. And I think now that they've moved beyond that, I think this is, I don't think there is an end date at this point. It's something that we'll watch, but I think that we expect to see this revenue stream for some time.
Leader Camper?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Deputy Governor, for all you're doing with the budget, for the focus the governor has on education. I appreciate the $100 million coming back for broadband. I think that's important for us to reappropriate those funds that were held back last year. I would have loved to have seen that $100 million go to the cities and counties that we held back to. But anyway, I appreciate all the work you're doing. So what I didn't see in the amendment was the excess debt service fund. So like last year at the closing of 2021, there was a transfer of maybe about $54 million. And so the year before may have been about 31, if my memory serves me correctly. And I'm wondering, do you have an estimate of how much at close of June 30, 22, that might come from the debt service fund?
You want to respond to that?
Yeah, so that's something that we look at every year. It's part of our process to update we develop the governor's budget each year. At this point, we're not projecting a reversion or transfer. It's a transfer from the debt service back to general fund at the end of the year, mainly because we're going to use that to retire some outstanding debt, old debt that's not been issued, just close out some bonds. So we'll use that to cover that.
And so by doing that, we expect that would help with our tremendous rating that we continue to have with the rating agencies. And is that why we're making this decision to do that, or why are we deciding to apply it that way this year?
That's right. It's part of kind of our evaluation of the debt program, I guess, and that we look at debt that's been issued, authorized but never issued. Maybe it's for a project that didn't need the require amount. And so a lot of small pieces there. And so this is just, I would consider a kind of a cleanup process to clean up some of the old outstanding authorized but unissued debt.
Okay, thank you for that.
Leader Camper?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Also, I saw that there's And I remember there's about 350 that will be going to TCRS.
Mhm.
You know, we have a great treasurer. He does a great job. Our state is probably number one from how he's managed the retirement fund. We're probably at about actuarially about 91% in terms of our ability to pay our debt. So is there a reason that we're not using those funds to maybe go toward increasing teacher salary or, you know, maybe staff salaries? Or why are we choosing to put this 350 million into TCRS?
Yeah, that's a good question, Leader. I think that one of the things at the outset that we talked about was being cautious on using recurring funds for those type of expenses. And I think at least in this year, with these funds that have come in from, I guess, over and above the revenue projections that we thought we might have, that I certainly feel like in everything that we heard actually right in this room from the funding board presentations back in November told us that we needed to be very cautious in that the estimates for growth would be down in 23 compared to what we are seeing now in 22. And so that is basically what makes up a lot of that 1.3 in recurring funds that are being used for non-recurring. And so I feel like we need to have a level set year to really understand what our revenues are going to look like in a normal, back to normal setting, because so much revenue that we have now and over the last really 2 budget cycles, when you look at the federal dollars that have come in and the spending that has been done, resulting in the revenues that we now have, I don't think we can depend upon. I don't think we can depend upon them. And it's not just me. Certainly the economists have agreed that those recurring funds may not be there next year. And until we see kind of a level set of that, we just think it's prudent to invest in those items that will protect us in the future from having to come up with dollars on those things. Eventually, it'll save us in the recurring dollars, and there is a recurring savings that we'll get as a result of that investment.
Leader Camper.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Governor, for, you know, all you've been doing, you know, over the last year with, you know, I know it's demanding with all of the revenue we have, and it's, you know,
I'm not complaining.
it's expected to maybe go beyond over 500 million. So I know it's a challenge, but I know you guys, you and the governor are doing, you know, the best you can. And I appreciate the money going toward education. I wish we could do more, but I appreciate the prudence that you're taking.
Thank you.
Thank
Leader.
you.
And might mention on the TCRS issue, I think one of the things we have to remember, we've had great returns in that investment pool, but people who are smart say that we need to not expect those returns to be as large in the future. So I think we're very prudent. We have an obligation to the people who have worked for the state, worked as teachers, whatever roles, and have put their money into TCRS and are expecting to be able to have those dollars when they retire. So I think this is a prudent move to make sure that we can meet those obligations again without having to, maybe in years that when we're not quite so flush, have to go back and add money to keep the fund solvent. So I think it's a very wise use of one-time dollars to do that. And I thank the Deputy Governor and those who are involved in those decisions. Leader Lamberth, I believe you have another question.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And just kind of going through the list here a little bit, one of the things I was remiss in asking about earlier, item number 28 under higher education, reorganizing the career and technical grants to capital outlay. I know that was something, there was some money allocated for TCATs. There's some additional money for CTE. I know there's $750 million in one-time funds for CTE. If you can talk a little bit about how this changes any of that allocation in the proposed budget, and if it does.
Yeah. Good question there, Leader. So it doesn't change anything. So we put the 750 million, 500 in CT K through 12 as one time for equipment and renovations. That's still going to those schools as planned. These dollars were actually split out in the original budget, showing just to show you exactly where they were going, which schools, which TCATs that they would go toward. And now all we're doing is taking it from there technically and putting it over into capital. So we're just combining that 200 million that was in separate places in the original budget to show you exactly where those were and putting it as a lump sum over into the capital budget. So there's no less spending. It's the same dollars. Am I explaining that right? So does that make sense?
Leader Lambert.
Thank you. And on that, then, I know there was a list of specific projects that were going in there. Are we now lumping that into a fund so that they will all have the opportunity to apply for that, or is it the same list of projects?
Those dollars will go to those projects as designated. But we're just simply now, we're not de-designating it. We're just putting it in a lump sum over in the capital budget. So it'll still be used in the same manner.
Leader Lambert.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And thank you. Just wanted to clarify. I know we'll get a ton of emails from different TCATs asking that exact question if I didn't ask it out loud.
No, it's a good question.
And then here's another one. So on the original $200 million that was to assist with schools that were in a floodplain. So I know there have been different lists floated around of which schools fall in floodplain, how that's going to be organized. How does that stand in the amendment? What amount and what process are we looking at?
Yeah, so that's also good to point out to make sure, because there are a lot of systems following that. We had originally, I mean, this it came about fairly quickly. We started looking at it after the Waverly flood and recognized that there were a number of schools in a similar position. The initial work was done in identifying those, working with TEMA and Department of Education, working together. They identified 14 originally. As we continued to do research, they learned that there were actually more schools that had some portion of their property in a floodplain. So they did a deeper dive, and so actually 2 of those original 14 schools dropped out, but there were 2 more schools that went onto that list. So there's still 14, and they categorized those in high need, and those are the ones that will get this original $200 million. We'll continue to do more research and analysis on the other schools that are not in that high risk category, but may have some of their property in the floodplain, and we'll determine over the next year whether or not there needs to be any further funds put into that. But right now, this is for the 14 high risk schools that were identified, and the 200 million will go for that purpose.
Thank you very much.
Representative Ogles.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Deputy Commissioner. Wait a minute, I got that wrong.
That's all right.
Deputy Governor, Commissioner. I had some questions from some constituents, and I just wanted to try to figure out how to phrase this well. I'll try to be sensitive, but with like the looming war that's happening in Ukraine, and the hyperinflation that's going on, I've gotten a little criticism, a little pushback to say, it looks like y'all are spending money like Washington is. Tennessee's conservative, fiscally conservative. I know y'all are done well. You're one of the best in the nation, but this budget has just really grown. Can you help us with some talking points? I know we pride ourselves on being fiscally conservative, but especially, I guess, with the new $500 million going to the Titans, the budget seemed expanded quite a bit, and now it's just kind of hard to tolerate as far as feeling like it's fiscally conservative. Do you have any suggestions on how to combat that? I know we're in good shape, but I see a lot of things that we really want versus things that we might need and be necessity?
Absolutely. So thank you for that question. And I would say that I can't imagine how we would have a more fiscally conservative budget than the one that we're proposing here. And the reason is I over the entire history of our state, I don't think up until last year we never didn't spend all of the recurring revenue estimate dollars that were out there. Whatever additional revenues we had that were labeled recurring in a given year, we budgeted all of those dollars to be spent. Last year, we had $234 million that were recurring dollars that could have been spent on programs or growing government. We spent those dollars on non-recurring items. This year, with the additional revenues that have come in, really because of the prudence that we've shown in the last 2 years through that process, and in being conservative in how we invested, we put now of the $8 billion or so new dollars that have flowed into our coffers. We spent 5.7 billion of that in non-recurring spending items, and so I think those dollars are being put in places that will pay dividend in out years. For instance, a lot of that is in capital investment, in capital projects. We've got several billion dollars in deferred maintenance of buildings that are part of our state assets that continue to deteriorate. And a lot of these dollars are going into renovating those buildings or bringing them up to standard. And all that's going to do is save us dollars in the out years, because all of that work would have to be done at some point. And the more deferred maintenance, not doing something doesn't save us money. It costs us money in those out years. So because of the attention that we put on investing in capital, investing in deferred maintenance, and holding back that recurring spending, having $1.3 billion of recurring money that we're not going out the door with, it's going to be sitting in our bank account next year when we start the budget process. So I would say it is a very conservative budget.
Representative Vogel, you have a follow-up?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So with that, we think we're confident that if interest rates continue to rise and we take a major hit and we have an economic slowdown, are we going to, I just fear that we're going to wish we could go back in time and have that extra $1 billion sitting in the rainy day fund to absorb some additional costs that are coming down that are inevitable. But I appreciate your explanation. You did a good job with that, and I feel much more confident now after hearing that.
Kind of the converse of the question just before. I mean, the investment in the pension fund, the investment in the OPEB fund of $650 million between the two funds is another way. I mean, that could have been put in rainy day, but we chose to put it in those funds because of the things Chairman Hazelwood said. So that's another way of spending those dollars that will pay dividends in the future. Thank you, sir.
Representative Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. 3 quick questions. Going to the new stadium, the $500 million. Again, this will be a new constructed stadium?
Yes, sir.
Yes. You may have mentioned this. What will happen to the current stadium?
My understanding, sir, is that it'll eventually be torn down. So this would take the place, the new stadium would take the place of that.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Yesterday, the Appropriations Committee held our, I guess, hearing. And it's my understanding it was about $200 million in requests. Would you know if anything that the governor has presented or you all are presenting today would that include any of the legislative requests? If would you?
I would say yes, sir.
Representative Miller, we're in the process of comparing those
Yeah.
now. So.
Thank you. Third last question on slide 12. When we look at the comparison of total budget and federal government, you mentioned 22.7 billion. How much do Tennessee taxpayers contribute, let's say, toward that 22.7 billion? Tennessee taxpayers, how much money do we send the federal government as opposed to what is returned to us?
That's a good question. You're asking, make sure I understand, of the 22.7 or the 19.8 in 23, how much of that originated in Tennessee?
Exactly.
I don't think there's a way to know. I don't think there's a way that we can get to that number.
Okay.
Tennesseans are taxed. We send our money to the federal government, and there's no way to know dollar for dollar what is part of these dollars. We do know that Tennesseans beyond the 22.7 and the 19.8 that we're talking about here, we've received in the last year and a half or so around 16 billion plus in federal funding that has gone to Tennessee in some way, shape, or form. It may be to healthcare or higher ed institutions or individuals that applied for certain federal funds. So we know there's significant dollars from the federal government that have come in.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you,
Deputy
sir.
Governor.
Deputy Governor, I don't have anyone else on my list. So again, we thank you for being here today. And there's a lot of details for us to get familiar with. And I still hadn't memorized the original budget, and now I have these additional numbers to contend with. But we do appreciate the time that you've taken to work through them. And also, again, I just want to say on behalf of the committee and the legislature how much we appreciate your working with us and listening to us. And I think some of that is definitely reflected here, and we thank you for that.
Thank you as well.
We are now back in session, and we're going to take a bill out of order. We're going to, item 12, Representative Thompson has, he needs to leave, and I would just say that, please, I understand you're going to Chairman Wendell's father's visitation. Please give him all of our regards and let him know that he's in our thoughts and prayers.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yes, now.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Representative Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And members, HB 457's simple bill. Currently, the code requires that bail be paid to the clerk of the court only in cash, and this bill updates the requirement by allowing for commonly used and verifiable methods of payment by adding credit cards, debit cards, and cash apps as methods of payment. Fiscal note is 1.9 million in reduced expenses to local governments.
Okay, members, you've heard the explanation. Are there questions for Representative Thompson? Question's been called. If no objections, then we're voting on sending House Bill 457 to calendar and rules. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Moves to calendar and rules.
Thank you, Chair and Committee.
Okay, members, we're going to move back to item number 1 on our agenda. And this is going to be House Bill 2132. We have a motion and a second. Speaker Pro Tem Marsh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This allows metro governments, which are metro small governments, which were 2 in the state, to bring their hotel motel tax from 3% to a maximum of 6%.
Okay.
I'll answer any questions.
Okay, members, you've heard the explanation. Question's been called. Absent objections, we are voting to send House Bill 2132 to calendar and rules. All in favor say aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Moves to calendar and rules. Okay, item number 2 on our calendar is House Bill 2129, also by Pro Temp Speaker Marsh. Got a motion and a second. You're recognized on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill will allow the TWRA and the Sportsman's Endowment to start a lifetime Sportsman's Endowment Fund, which is an irrevocable trust. By them doing this, the Lifetime Sportsman's Fund will be able to be moved into that trust. And the AG and the treasurer has stated, if it's moved into that trust correctly, then they can invest the funds in the funds that the treasurer normally invests in. Now, they've got $71 million in that fund. They're drawing $113,000 a year interest. If we put it into this trust and let the treasurer invest it, we're going to get between $4 and $5 million interest, which should lower the cost of hunting license in the future. With that, I'll answer any questions.
Okay, members, you've heard the explanation. Any questions about House Bill 2129? Okay, question's been called. We're voting to send House Bill 2129 to calendar and rules. All in favor say aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Moves to calendar and rules. We move to item number 3 on our agenda. We've got a motion and a second on House Bill 2146, also by Speaker Pro Temp Marsh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill comes from the governor's office, and by working with the Department of Safety and the governor's office, Chairman Howell and I and Senator Bailey are what we're trying to do here is cut a lot of regulations and rules from the Department of Safety in the state of Tennessee on allowing our citizens to become truck drivers quickly, to get their CDLs quickly. We're cutting a lot of regulations out. We have a lot of regulations still left that they're federal regulations, but we think we've gone about as far as we can to cut the red tape and trying to get our guys into trucks and help with this supply chain mess. We're also, in this bill, we're allowing third-party testers to test drivers all across the state. We're giving the Tennessee Department of Safety more money to hire auditors to audit these testers to make sure they're doing it properly. We've got 3,000 potential drivers in backlog waiting to go through this testing. So we think this will open it up quickly. We also have a provision to allow 18-year-olds to drive under some regulations intra-state, Tennessee only. So that's going to open it up for some new drivers. With that, I'll answer any questions.
Okay. Any discussion? Question's been called. We are then voting to send House Bill 2146 to calendar and rules. All in favor say aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Goes to calendar and rules. Thank you, Speaker Pro Tem Marsh. We move to item number 4 on our agenda, which is House Bill 1924 by Deputy Speaker Johnson. We have a motion and a second. Deputy Speaker Johnson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 1924 renews the nursing home bed assessment, which expires on June 30th of 2022.
Question's been called. Absent any objections, we are then voting to send House Bill 1924 to calendar and rules. All in favor say aye. Opposed? Ayes have it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Deputy Speaker Johnson moves to calendar and rules. Okay, item number 5 on the calendar is House Bill 1860 by Chairman Haston. And I don't see him here. So let's roll that to the heel of the calendar. and move to item. Okay, I think we're going to go to item number 6 on our calendar, which is House Bill 1654 by Chairman Howell. Chairman Howell, we have a motion and a second on your bill. You've got some amendments. The first one is Finance Subcommittee Amendment Number 1. This is drafting code 16076 by Chairman Howell. Do we have a motion on the amendment? Motion and a second. Okay, Chairman Howell, you're recognized on the amendment.
That,
Oh, okay. Question's been called. Absent objections, then we're voting to put the amendment on the bill, Amendment 16076 on House Bill 1654. All in favor say aye. Opposed? The amendment goes on the bill. There's a second amendment. This is Finance Subcommittee Amendment Number 2, drafting code 016273. This amendment is by Chairman Houck. You've got a second, motion and a second, and question's been called. Any objection to calling the questions on this amendment?
can I go? Can I leave?
Okay, then we're voting to add Amendment Number 2, 016273, on to House Bill 1654. All in favor say aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Goes on the bill. And we've got a third amendment. This is Finance Subcommittee Amendment Number 3. This is drafting code 013341 by Chairman Howell. Chairman Howell, you've got a motion and a second on the amendment. Question's been called, so we'll vote to put this amendment on the bill. All in favor say aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. So Amendment 013314 goes on House Bill 1654. Now, Chairman Howell, I think we've got the bill in the proper posture, and we're ready for an explanation. Okay, question's been called. Absent objection, we are voting to send House Bill 1654 to calendar and rules. All in favor say aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Chairman Howell goes to calendar and rules.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee.
Okay, item number 7 is also Chairman Howell. This is House Bill 1655. Chairman Howell, you've got a motion and a second. We're ready for an explanation.
This is the specialty license plates omnibus bill from Transportation Committee.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay. Question's been called. We're voting to send House Bill 1655 to calendar and rules. All in favor say aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. House Bill 1655 goes to calendar and rules. Item number 8 on the calendar.
Thank you very much, committee.
Is House Bill 1964 by Chairman Rudd. Chairman Rudd, we've got a motion and a second on your bill, and we're ready for an explanation.
System once a year in schools. That's what it does.
You've heard the explanation. Are there questions of the
And it's to
sponsor?
test the equipment, not the whole school. So,
Chairman Hicks, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Chairman Rudd, can you tell me what exactly does this look like? I understand what the bill says, but how do you carry this out?
well, what we've discovered with remote learning is it's a valuable tool in certain situations. And when there's natural disasters, fires, floods, that we may need this. And what this system will do is for those school systems that have remote learning capability, they will test the equipment to make sure the equipment is working. They won't put the whole system through a complete test. They're just making sure all their equipment is working just in case the schools have to use it in the case of a disaster. They'll run the drills through and learn if there's any mistakes, and the Department of Education will help correct those mistakes.
Madam Chair.
Chairman Hicks.
So each spring, we actually go through my school district. We go through an exercise where we have to jump on it. And of course, all this is in preparation for online testing, which we hope to eventually get to. But we have to jump online. And so right now, our school system, we don't all do it. We just arbitrarily pick which grades we want to do. Is that going to suffice? So basically what we're doing now will suffice what you're wanting to do, or would this be in addition to?
No, the system will states working, you will draw up your own rules, working with the Department of Education. And at least once a year, you will have a remote test of your equipment for remote learning. So if you're already doing that and the Department of Education approves it, you probably would already meet the requirement.
Okay.
And for those schools that don't have the equipment to do this, in some rural schools, they don't have to do it.
Okay. All
And
right,
that's
gotcha.
why the fiscal note was removed when we first started moving the bill, is because we were going to have a huge fiscal note to buy equipment for the schools that don't have this capability.
I understand. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Are there other questions of the sponsor? Seeing none, without objection, we're voting on House Bill 1964. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Chairman Rudd, your bill moves on to calendar and rules. Item number 9 on our calendar, House Bill 1949 by Representative Darby. We have a motion and a second. Representative Darby, you are recognized on your bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There are 343 of 345 cities in Tennessee whose compensation is paid to their elected officials or determined locally. The remaining 2, Elizabethton and Union City, have the compensation of elected officials set in state statute. This legislation is permissive and includes safeguards that mandate this action be done by 2/3 vote of the local governing body and only effective following the next local election.
You've heard the sponsor's explanation. Are there any questions? Seeing none, question has been called. Without objection, we're voting on House Bill 1949. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Bill moves on to calendar and rules.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee.
Item number 10, House Bill 2106 by Representative Hakeem. We have a motion and a second. We do have an amendment on this bill. The drafting code for the amendment, Representative, I'm showing 016009. Is that match with what you have?
Just 1 second. 16009. Yes,
All right.
ma'am. I apologize. I had a different number as to when the bill was.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, so we have an amendment, drafting code 016009, that we need to get on the bill. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the amendment, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. The drafting code 16009 is attached. Now, Representative Hakeem, I believe we have it in the proper posture. If you'd like to tell us what the bill as amended does.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Through the Tennessee Board of Education, LEAs shall implement curriculum in grades 5 through 8 designed to educate students in Black history and culture, the contribution of Black people in the history and development of this country and the world. The Social Studies Standards Review is not until July of 2023. This would not be implemented until school year 2025-26. So it's within the cycle of standard study, of the standards study. So it will not be additional cost involved. And it's been designated as non-significant when it comes to the financial piece.
All right, are the questions of the sponsor? Question has been called. Without objection, we're voting on House Bill 2106 as amended. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. House Bill 2106 moves on to calendar and rules.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members.
Item number 11 on our calendar, House Bill 2697 by Representative Parkinson. We have a motion and a second. Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
About your bill.
Is the amendment traveling with the bill, or do we need to put it?
I believe the amendment is traveling.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Under this legislation, right now, currently, you can become a master barber instructor or a cosmetology instructor in the state of Tennessee. However, there's a slight difference in the instruction when you go to cosmetology school and barbering school. Under this bill, it will allow the instructors in barbering to go and pick up the classes that they didn't get in their barbering class for cosmetology, and vice versa. When they do that, they can become dual instructors as both a master instructor for barbering and cosmetology at the same time. And that's what this bill does.
Heard the explanation. Are there questions? Seeing none, we're voting on House Bill 2697. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. House Bill 2697 moves on to calendar and rules.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, committee, and thank you, staff. Appreciate you.
That brings us to item 13 on our calendar for today, House Bill 1544 by Representative Chairman Weaver. We have a motion and a second. Chairman Weaver, you're recognized on your bill.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Lady, and thank you, members. The bill before you was amended, and the amendment is 133302. I think it's with traveling with
It
the
is
bill.
traveling with.
Okay. I just want to make sure we're on the same page. Basically, this authorized private non-commercial vehicle owners and lessees to renew their registration plates for a 24-month period rather than the current 12-month period. There is a fee to offset the revenue otherwise generated by that of a 12-month registration. It will begin January 1 of 2023. So it requires that the 2-year plate to be issued upon payment of registration fee and a fee equal to the cost of designing and manufacturing the plates. So the bill creates an entirely new plate class, and the design of the license plate would be up to the department. It's not available on commercial, specialty, personalized, or other non-standard plates, and it is not to be confused with the new license plates that we have the option of In God We Trust. So it's a brand new plate, and if you only want to pay for it 2 years versus 1 year, you can. You have the option. That's what the bill does.
All right, I do have Chairman Williams. I believe you have a question.
Thank you, Representative Weaver. I think this bill is a good idea. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be supporting the bill today. The reason why I'm not supporting the bill is if we begin in state government to only do budgeting on an annual basis, but yet we collect revenues on a biannual basis, then we're going to end up with a fiscal problem in the future because there would be a delay in revenues when they came in. If we were only doing this on one area and we only limited it to that, my fear is that we'd collect a lot of money now, but then because we're budgeting in a year, that the following year that will be difficult to fund things, that we might spend the money and make it hard, the budgetary process harder. And so if we were going to start doing everything on a 2-year cycle and be like Texas and do a budgetary cycle every 2 years, that would make more sense to do your bill. I recognize that in your mind's eye, it's a convenience, and I recognize that it could be a convenience, obviously for me and my family as well, particularly. But because of that, I'm not going to be supporting your bill unless maybe I missed something. But thank you.
Chairman Weaver.
It is permissible. So it's not mandated, as I understand it. It is. I was told it was permissible. So like your counties don't have to do this.
Well, Chairman.
I'm Chairman Williams. Sorry.
I recognize that my county don't have to do this, but the impetus would be if all the counties did choose to do it, then when the revenues come into the state, it'd be very unpredictable, I guess is the question. So I recognize the intent there, but I appreciate bringing the bill, but I'm unfortunately not going to be able to support it. Thank you.
Chairman Todd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And to the chairman's point, I personally, and you know a lot more about the budget process than I do at this point, but I would think that our folks in state government can keep up with this money and know if it's a 2-year fee or a 1-year fee, and therefore show us, just like they do with recurring money, what's recurring and non-recurring. So I would think it wouldn't be too difficult. It's not like necessarily like sales tax. It's coming from a wide variety of things. It's a very specific purpose that it's coming from. So I would think we could keep up with it. Somebody can argue a different point. I'm not sure about that.
Leader Gant.
Thank you, Chairman. Would these not renew at the same time, but over a 2-year cycle where they're renewing at the same time? So, I mean, it would average out over 2 years?
When it begins on January 1 of 2023, yes, it would. I mean, every 2 years you go get your plate, and it'll have
Okay.
a sticker or whatever it is on there. Did I answer your question correctly?
Yes.
Okay.
Leader Lamberth.
Sorry, I'm just coming back to the permissive part on this. I can't find anywhere in the amendment. Maybe I was looking at Amendment 2 that came out of House Transportation. And Chairman Howell was in here earlier, but that amendment seemed to indicate that it's open to everybody statewide, that it's not
Mhm.
permissive as to each county. It's a statewide.
Yes.
So
sorry.
it's not permissive. It's just permissive to the individuals that wish to participate. It's not mandatory that we all go to a 2-year plate.
Mm-mm.
What you meant by permissive is that it's just permissive as to each individual as to if that's what you want to do.
Representative Weaver.
Yes.
Okay. And one follow-up, sorry.
Leader Lamberth.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And when you mentioned earlier they're going to design a new plate, what's the purpose of kind of a full redesign? We just went through a redesign, and that rollout has been, I think, difficult. I mean, it's worked fine, but there has been, a variety of things dealing with LPRs and others. And so in designing a new plate, I mean, will it basically mirror the current plate? Will folks be able to choose "In God We Trust" on the plate if they'd like, just as they do now? Or are we talking about a total new redesign?
Representative Weaver.
As I understand it, Representative, it is going to create an entirely new plate class. So for those of you who want to do it every other year, you have that option. And the design of the license plate would be up to the department. That's what the department told me.
Okay.
Did that help?
Somewhat, but we also allocated several $1 million to a new plate. And so
True.
I can follow up with them and you offline after committee. It's fine. Thank you.
Are there Representative Ogles?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. To the sponsor, I'm going to support this amendment because I think this, not to point fingers at anybody, but the whole renewal process for plates and how we do this is one of the most burdensome, tedious, worst processes of any state government, period. It's just terrible. My business, we have a ton of vehicles. We have to build a board, go get stuff registered. It is the most cumbersome. I wish I could prepay for 10 years for every vehicle I have, let you keep the insurance, I don't care what it costs. We would pay triple to not have to deal with this process. It's terrible. It's cumbersome. It needs to be fixed at some point. I'm in a bad mood about state government today, evidently, but
Representative Ogles, we're definitely glad that you aren't going to be negative. Representative Sexton.
Everything that he just said.
Chairman Hicks.
Thank you, Chair Lady. And just a quick question, Chair Lady Weaver, what about wheel tax? So if I pay my fee for my tag and my county has a wheel tax, so every 2 years I pay for my tag, but I'll still have to go in, right, every year. So unfortunately, Representative Ogles, I don't think you're going to get out of going there every year if your county has a wheel tax. Is that correct?
Representative Weaver.
Uncle Sam's going to get his money.
So you would have to go in each year.
Yeah, I mean, this just deals with
Okay.
your tag, period.
Okay.
And for those of us who might have been caught driving with your tag expired, and I bet there's many of you on this committee, because I'm one of them, and not intentionally, you just hadn't gotten in there. Well, you got a little more time, maybe.
Are there other questions? Question has been called. Any objection to the calling of the question? I had a comment, but I'll leave it alone. All right. That's fine. All those in favor of House Bill 1544, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? No.
I don't know. I don't know. That's good, Johnny.
If you'd like to be recorded a no, let the clerk know. If you want to be recorded as present, not voting, let the clerk know that as well. Chairman Weaver, your bill moves on to calendar and rules. Item number 14 on our calendar, House Bill 2627 by Chairman Crawford. Chairman Crawford, you have a motion and a second. You're recognized.
Sevens allow the boards of examiners the flexibility to license competent engineers and landscape architects. You have to have a master's degree in engineering technology and 8 years of experience to take the test.
All right, you've heard the explanation and the question has been called. Is there objection to calling of the question? Seeing none, we're voting on House Bill 2627. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? The ayes
Thank
have
you,
it.
Madam Chair, Lady and Committee.
Very good bill, Chairman Crawford. Item number 15, House Bill 2194 by Leader Gant. Leader Gant, you're recognized.
Thank
We have a
you,
motion
Chair
and a
Lady.
second.
What this legislation is doing is setting up special litter grants for nonprofits, law enforcement, and cities.
And I did have a quick question just to clarify. These dollars are dollars that are already available. It's just a reallocation, correct?
That is correct. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. The question was called. Any objection to calling of the question? Seeing none, we're voting on House Bill 2194. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. House Bill 2194 moves on to calendar and rules. Item number 16, House Bill 2271 by the Representative Ogles. I hope your mood improves. We have a motion and a second. Please present your bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I actually had a meeting with the treasurer. I wanted to clarify, we greatly expanded the statutes for which criminal asset forfeiture can be done in the state of Tennessee. I just want to be sure that money, when it's distributed, that it gets to the victims of the crime and it actually restitution is addressed. So if it'd be the pleasure of the chair and the committee, I'd ask for a motion to roll 1 week.
Without objection, House Bill 2271 is rolled 1 week. Item number 17 is House Bill 1735 by Chairman Todd. Chairman Todd, you are recognized. You have a motion and a second.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What this bill does, it lowers the age to carry a handgun in public from 21 to 18. Currently, 18-year-olds can possess legally in the state. They can carry a firearm in their home or in their car, in their boat, other places as that. But when they leave that structure, their castle in the law, then they are prohibited from protecting themselves. And this just lowers the age to 18, just as we do, allowing for a citizen to vote. And I would remind the committee that this has a positive fiscal note. It's going to make about $200,000 for TBI, Department of Safety, and locals the first year, and about $130,000 the second year. I actually found out something just a few days ago that I didn't realize what this would do. I had a U.S. Marshal approach me and say that this was actually good for law enforcement. He was very encouraging, said that this actually is going to allow a different pool of our adult citizens to be eligible for many local law enforcement agencies to hire and fill some vacancies. And I just didn't realize that. So I've checked that out with a few of them and found that to be the case. So I would certainly hope that our discussion in this committee, being on finance, would certainly sit around the positive fiscal note. And I'm sure our fiscal review folks can provide other information if we need it.
Thank you, Chairman Todd. We do have a request for testimony. And without objection, we'll go out of session and I'll ask Linda McFadden Ketchum. And as we discussed, your testimony will be limited to 3 minutes, and we would hope that it would address the fiscal matters since this is the Finance Committee. Please introduce yourself and your organization if you'd like to be identified as such.
Good afternoon. I'm Linda McFadden Ketchum, representing Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America, Tennessee. We're a gun safety and gun violence prevention organization. Current Tennessee law requires a person to be at least 21 years of age to carry a handgun in public. We oppose weakening this law. As I understand it, this committee focuses on the cost of new legislation. So for now, I'll hold off on objections to this bill regarding the fatal mistakes that inexperienced teenagers make with cars, drugs, sex, and firearms. Some will want you and our fellow Tennesseans to believe that this bill is a moneymaker for the state. For example, the fiscal note does show that the Department of Safety, TBI, and local law enforcement will gain more than they will lose with a permitting age of 18 rather than 21, compared to last year's approximately $20 million cost to implement permitless carry. This bill looks like a bargain. The $20 million was for anticipated increases in incarceration and over $2.9 million in reductions to unbudgeted revenue for decreases in handgun permits as a result of permitless carry. But is it a bargain? Because it is easier, many, if not all, 18 to 20-year-olds will simply skip the permit altogether, carry loaded handguns into public places, and put their and others' lives at greater risk. 18, 19, and 20-year-olds already kill others with guns at a rate 3 times higher than adults 21 and older. Rather than a bargain, this bill will cause more funerals, more hospitalizations, more trauma for you, for me, and for our fellow Tennesseans. But these costs, of course, are not mentioned in the fiscal note. Put it in perspective. Right now, our state has the 8th highest overall cost of gun violence in the United States of America. That's $1,346 per person every year. Right now, this costs Tennessee $9 billion every year, of which $433 million is paid by us, the taxpayers. The result, this money, our money, goes down the drain when it could be used to save lives instead of ending them. Here in Tennessee, we're in the middle of a public health crisis that on your watch has become much worse. While this body has been relaxing gun laws and moving us to guns everywhere, more Tennesseans have died in shootings. All of us are paying for the carnage. How many more state dollars are you going to dole out to comply with the gun lobby's agenda? This bill is an incompetent use of the people's money. Guns everywhere is bad for Tennessee. It costs too much in lives and dollars. Please spend our money in a more competent way that supports life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I hope you'll vote against HB 1735. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there questions while we're out of session? Representative Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. It's not a question, a request. Could you provide me with a copy of your presentation? I mean, you mentioned so much data in there.
Of course.
I'd like to have a copy of that.
All right.
Thank you.
Are there other questions? Ms. McFadden Ketchum, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
We're now back in session. We are back on House Bill 1735. Are there questions of the sponsor? Question has been called on the bill. Representative Miller. The question was called. Any objection? Without objection? All right, we are voting on House Bill 1735. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. No. If you'd like to be recorded as a no, please see the clerk. But House Bill 1735 moves on to calendar and rules. Item number 18 is House Bill 2542 by Chairman Williams. We have a motion. We have a second. Chairman Williams, you're recognized, and I do believe we have an amendment.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. The amendment drafting code is 15824.
That's what I have. We have a motion and a second on the amendment.
All the amendment that I just said actually just changed the effective date to July 1st.
All right. Without objection, we're voting on the amendment 015824 being attached to House Bill 2542. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. The amendment's now traveling with the bill. Chairman Williams, please describe your bill as amended.
Thank you, Chair Lady and members. House Bill 2542 would allow for our local county clerks to be able to continue to perfect liens and get paid for the services they do. Currently, Department of Revenue collects $11 for every perfected lien, but the Department of Revenue doesn't do all the lien perfections. Our county clerks have been doing it now for 3 years. This bill would allow the local rate to be raised from $5.50 to $8. It's a $3, $8.50, a $3 increase. These fees are passed on to the ratepayers. I'm happy to answer any of the questions the members might have.
Are there questions from Chairman Williams after hearing his explanation? Question has been called. All those in favor of House Bill 2542 as amended, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. House Bill 2542 moves on to calendar and rules. Item number 19, House Bill 2674, also by Chairman Williams. We have a motion and a second. Chairman Williams, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair Lady members. I also have an amendment 014888.
Motion.
We have a motion and a second on the amendment. Please describe the amendment.
Thank you. This amendment rewrites the bill. Last year, the members may remember that the speaker and I worked on a bill as it relates to the calculation of fiscal notes as it related to the Department of Corrections. This bill is amended bill further changes how Department of Corrections fiscal notes are calculated, in that it takes the highest of 3-year average of those fiscal notes for both increases and decreases in incarceration. And the most important revision is it gives a net total. So if a member were to decrease incarceration in one category, increase it in another, the actual fiscal note would be calculated based upon the net difference. With that description, Chair, Lady, and members, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Are there questions of the sponsor? Seeing none, we are voting on the amendment, drafting code 014888. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. The drafting code 104888 amendment is hereby attached. And Chairman Williams, I believe you said that that amendment does rewrite the bill.
Yes, ma'am, it does rewrite the bill.
So are there any questions of the same information we just heard? Seeing none, we are voting on House Bill 2674. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. House Bill 2674 moves on to calendar and rules. Item 5 on our agenda that we moved to the Hill has the sponsors asked that we have rolled out 1 week. So without objection, item 5, House Bill 1860, rolled 1 week.
Okay, last bill on our calendar is item 20. It's House Bill 1985 by Chair Lady Hazelwood. Chair Lady Hazelwood, you have a motion and a second. We're ready for a description.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is the hospital assessment bill that we pass each year that will ultimately result in $1.7 billion into 10 care coffers.
Question has been called. Absent objection, we are voting to send House Bill 1985 to calendar and rules. All in favor say aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Moves to calendar and rules.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That does complete our calendar for today. Are there any other announcements or other business that we need to take up? Seeing none, we stand adjourned.